Richard was a humble person with little education, making a living through gardening services. At most, he could secure a job as a caretaker. However, Richard had a problem. Things almost always went wrong in his life, and at the slightest mishap, he would exclaim, "Misfortune! Hellish misfortune that pursues me." Even though his wife advised him to stop uttering such things, it seemed like an automatic response that escaped his lips. In his last job as a caretaker on a farm, he got careless with drinking and left the gate to the sheep pen open. Almost all the sheep escaped, and when the owner noticed, he hurried to call Richard, who was still somewhat drunk, to help capture the sheep. Unfortunately, many of them ran towards the road and were hit by cars, causing significant losses for the farm owner. He had to be restrained by his children and employees from doing something rash against Richard. "I'll give you until tomorrow morning to pack up your things and disappear from my sight. Tomorrow at this time, I don't want to see your face here," said the deeply irritated farmer. There was no alternative for Richard but to pack up and leave. As always, he began to rant, "Misfortune! Cursed misfortune that follows me. Wherever I go, this curse follows. Hell! For the love of God," said his wife, "stop. Stop saying these names. You attract bad things, words have power." Richard seemed to get angrier and continued his outburst. "Everything goes wrong in this damn life. This is the second job this misfortune has made me lose." The next day, early in the morning, Richard, with his meager belongings in a small cart, left the farm with no destination. They didn't know where they were going, but along the way, Richard noticed from afar that someone was following them. At first, he thought it was just a passerby, but they hadn't passed anyone, and the person always maintained that distance from the small cart. Indignant and thinking it was a farm overseer following them to make sure they went far away, Richard stopped the cart. "Woman, stay here. I'll go have a talk with that man who's been following us since we left the farm. I think he's sent to bother me." "Be careful," said his wife, trying to see the man. Richard approached the wanderer, who strangely also stopped after Richard halted the cart. He noticed that the wanderer looked like a beggar, extremely dirty, emitting an unbearable smell, with torn clothes and shoes, carrying a filthy burlap sack on his back. Green liquid could be seen oozing from the sack down the wanderer's back. "Halt! Who are you? If you're some lackey sent by that wretch, go back. I don't want any bootlickers following me." The wanderer, wearing a hat, slowly lifted his head and stared fixedly at Richard, who was taken aback. The face was extremely dirty, the long, repugnant beard seemed to have come from a swamp, and his eyes were large and fixed, with many red veins visible around them. This sight made Richard take 2 steps back. "Go away!" shouted Richard. "Approach me or my family, and I'll kill you." The wanderer smiled, revealing his rotten teeth and yellow drool dripping from the corner of his mouth. Richard felt nauseous. "Go away. Disappear. Who are you?" Then the wanderer began to speak, with a hoarse voice, seemingly struggling. "I am Misfortune. I've been following you for a long time, and only now do you realize it. I can't go away because you call me every day. Here I am, and I will go with you." As the wanderer spoke, that repulsive drool dripped from his mouth, making his beard even dirtier. In desperation, Richard ran away, jumped onto the cart in a panic, and his frightened wife asked what was happening. He couldn't speak, he just made the small mule race down the dirt road, knocking over some utensils. They reached the gate of another farm and called for help. The farm workers came running to see what was happening. After calming down a bit and explaining the situation, the owner of this farm, feeling pity for Richard and his wife, offered them a job in the fields, which they promptly accepted. They thought their lives would change, but in the evening, after settling into one of the farmhouses ready to start the next day, Richard went to a fence to smoke a cigarette and ponder what had happened in the morning. However, in the distance, on the small road, he could see a figure standing, illuminated only by the moon, carrying what seemed to be a sack on their back. Richard began to cry. In a prayer-like tone, he asked that the stranger go away. He had never prayed before, doing it in his own way, but it had a deeper meaning. Instead of repeating well-known prayers, he prayed from the depths of his heart, from his soul. When he opened his eyes at a certain moment, he saw that the stranger was taking steps backward, not turning away, until disappearing into the darkness.